Before we dive in, if you love epic tales of war, strategy, hit that subscribe and like button, turn on notifications, and join our growing legion of warriors. Now, let's begin. Imagine this. A vast, ancient council chamber, filled with the most powerful beings in the galaxy. The air is thick with tension. Alien diplomats, their forms ranging from towering insectoids to gelatinous masses, whisper among themselves. A decision is about to be made, one that will reshape the fate of an entire species, and unknowingly, doom the council itself. The subject of their debate? Humanity. For decades, humans had been rising, too fast for the council's comfort. Their growth was unnatural, their advancements unprecedented. No other species had climbed from first contact to interstellar civilization in mere centuries. Most took millennia to develop beyond their homeworld, shackled by the natural pace of evolution and societal stagnation. But humans? They defied the rules. They adapted at speeds that unsettled even the oldest races. Every war, every crisis, every setback only seemed to make them stronger. They had emerged from the ashes of their own history, learning from every catastrophe, every empire that had risen and fallen before them, and worst of all, they never stayed in their place. To the Galactic Council, humanity was a dangerous variable, an anomaly that threatened the careful balance of power. They weren't the strongest, nor the most technologically advanced. They weren't the wealthiest, or the most widespread. But what made them terrifying was their refusal to accept limits. No matter how many barriers the Council imposed, no matter how many warnings were given, humans found a way to break through. Their warships had already begun to rival those of older empires. Their thinkers and scientists had started unlocking secrets the Council had long hoarded for themselves. They had even begun making alliances with species once thought to be beyond diplomacy, turning former enemies into allies through sheer audacity and persistence. Enough was enough. The motion was put forth. Earth was to be expelled from the Galactic Council. Their influence cut off. Their access to the grand hyperlanes, the ancient pathways that connected the stars, was to be revoked. Their trade agreements severed. Any species found dealing with them would face sanctions, economic ruin, and possible military intervention. The message was clear. Humanity was to be isolated. If they were left to stagnate, left to struggle without the vast resources of the galactic community, perhaps they would finally stop. Perhaps, like so many species before them, they would accept their place beneath the true rulers of the stars. The vote was nearly unanimous. In a single moment, humanity's fate was sealed. The proclamation was sent. Earth's representatives were expelled from the council chambers, their protests ignored. The great hyperlanes were locked to human ships. Alien ambassadors withdrew from Sol's orbit, their promises of unity revealed as empty words. The human colonies, once thriving with trade, now faced the suffocating weight of economic collapse. It was, in the eyes of the Council, a decisive and necessary action. They had won, or so they thought, because what they had just done was make the greatest mistake in galactic history. For the Council, exile was a death sentence. Civilizations that had been cut off before had faded into irrelevance, unable to survive without the lifeline of interstellar trade and advanced technology. It was assumed that humanity would do the same, that without access to vital resources, rare metals, exotic fuels, biological enhancements, they would regress, consumed by internal strife and stagnation. But what the Council had never understood was that humanity thrived in adversity. At first, the struggle was real. Without access to the hyperlanes, travel between human colonies slowed to a crawl. Advanced medical supplies ran low. Factories once supplied by off-world materials were forced to shut down. Humanity was left with only what it could produce itself, and what little could be smuggled past the Council's blockades. Many believed this was the beginning of Earth's decline, but humans had seen worse. Had they not survived a world scarred by endless war? Had they not clawed their way through global disasters, famines, and plagues that wiped out entire generations? Had they not rebuilt after every empire, every civilization before them had collapsed? What the Council called an insurmountable crisis, humans called history. And history had taught them one undeniable truth. When the world turns against them, they innovate. It started as a whisper among the brightest minds of Earth, a desperate gamble. If they could no longer rely on the hyperlanes, they needed another way. Faster-than-light travel had always been a closely guarded secret, its deepest mysteries hoarded by the ancient civilizations of the galaxy. No species had ever developed it on their own without outside help. The Council had ensured that. The laws of physics were supposed to be an unbreakable wall, one that kept lesser races dependent on the Council's technology. But humans, they never did respect walls. And so, in hidden laboratories beneath the surface of Mars, in massive underground complexes on Titan, in secret stations orbiting the outer planets, Earth's greatest scientists began working on something that should have been impossible. A way to move between the stars freely, without the Council's pathways, without reliance on their ancient systems. A new form of propulsion, one that would make humanity untouchable. They failed. Again and again. Prototypes exploded. Crews were lost in the void. The energy requirements were beyond anything they had ever encountered. But still, they pushed forward. Each failure brought a lesson, each loss a breakthrough. Then, it happened. The moment that changed everything. A single small research vessel, the Dauntless, was the first to test the final prototype. It was a suicide mission, the crew fully aware that they might never return. The ship's engines roared, bending the very fabric of space, creating a ripple unlike anything seen before. And then, it vanished. For 3 long minutes, Earth held its breath. Had they just sent another crew to their deaths? Had their ambition outstripped their reach? But then, the Dauntless reappeared, not drifting, not lost, but exactly where it was meant to be, 5 light-years away. The impossible had become real. Humanity had done what no other species had ever accomplished on their own. They had created their own form of faster-than-light travel, a system independent of the hyperlanes, independent of Council control. The gates of the stars were no longer locked to them. The Council had tried to chain humanity down, but in doing so, they had given them the greatest gift of all, freedom. And when humanity returned to the galactic stage, it would not be as outcasts, it would be as conquerors. The Dauntless had returned, and with it, humanity's chains had been shattered. Word of the breakthrough spread like wildfire across Earth and her colonies. Scientists, engineers, military strategists, all scrambled to understand the implications. Faster-than-light travel, independent of the hyperlanes. It was the kind of power that could unmake the established order of the galaxy. But there was a problem. The prototype engine that had carried the Dauntless across 5 light-years was far from perfect. It required immense energy, straining the ship's reactors to their absolute limits. The calculations had to be flawless. One miscalculation, and a vessel could be lost forever in the void. The system was barely stable, and mass-producing it was out of the question. The excitement of the discovery was quickly tempered by cold reality, yet humanity was undeterred. For months, teams across the Sol system worked tirelessly to refine the technology. Every piece of data from the Dauntless was analyzed, every flaw dissected. The first breakthrough came from an unlikely source, a forgotten branch of physics, once dismissed as theoretical nonsense. Quantum field manipulation, the ability to bend space without tearing it, to create controlled distortions rather than brute force jumps. The first true human FTL drive was born, the slipstream engine. Unlike the hyperlanes, which relied on fixed corridors of space, the slipstream engine allowed ships to carve their own paths. Humanity was no longer bound to predetermined routes. No checkpoints, no tolls, no galactic overseers controlling where they could go. It was a revolution in travel, and the Council had no idea it had happened. Humanity knew better than to announce their triumph. The moment the Council learned of this breakthrough, they would act, whether through diplomacy or force. The goal wasn't just to survive, it was to win, to ensure that when they returned to the stars, they would never be threatened again. So they played a long game. Earth's military-industrial complex went into overdrive, churning out ships in hidden facilities. Massive orbital shipyards disguised as abandoned mining stations. Research facilities buried deep beneath the crusts of barren moons. The Council had underestimated humanity's ability to wage war in secret. But war wasn't the only thing on their minds. The slipstream drive had given humanity access to something far greater than just travel. Exploration. Before their exile, the hyperlanes had determined where humans could expand. The Council had conveniently left them with only the least valuable regions, scarce in resources, distant from the galactic core and riddled with hazards. But now, every unexplored system was fair game, and it was among the uncharted stars that humanity found its greatest treasure. The discovery was made on the edges of known space, a rogue planet drifting between systems, untouched by any civilization. The first survey teams dismissed it as unremarkable, until deep scans revealed something impossible beneath its frozen surface. A structure. Not ruins, not a derelict ship, but an active facility, one that had been running for what appeared to be millions of years. Cautiously, an exploration team entered. Inside, they found remnants of a civilization long extinct, and a cache of technology far beyond anything the Council possessed. Among the most valuable was a device that altered humanity's fate forever. A self-replicating nanite forge, capable of constructing entire fleets from raw material at an unprecedented speed. It was a godsend. With this, humanity's production capabilities skyrocketed. Ships that once took years to build were now completed in months. Weapons that had been theoretical concepts became reality overnight. And still, the Council remained blind to what was coming. For years, humanity operated in the shadows, constructing fleets, refining their technology, expanding in directions no one thought possible. Then came the final test. A single, heavily armed human warship, the Resolute, was chosen for an operation unlike any before. Its mission: infiltrate the outermost sectors of Council space and see if humanity's advancements could withstand scrutiny. The ship jumped into enemy-controlled territory, its slipstream drive flaring to life. It appeared, unseen, near a remote monitoring station operated by a minor Council race. The plan was simple: gather intelligence and leave without a trace. But things didn't go as planned. The station's automated defenses detected the Resolute. A distress signal was sent before the crew could jam communications. Within minutes, Council warships were en route. A single human vessel against an armada. The Council's forces, confident in their superiority, hailed the intruder. Their demands were clear: surrender, or be destroyed. Humanity had been waiting for this moment. The Resolute didn't run, it didn't negotiate. It opened fire. The first Council ship to close the distance was an older destroyer, built on outdated Council technology that had remained largely unchanged for centuries. The human ship, in contrast, was a product of rapid, relentless innovation. Its railguns, enhanced with newly discovered mass acceleration techniques, tore through the enemy's shields in a single volley. Shock rippled through the enemy fleet. No human ship should have been capable of such devastation. A counterattack was ordered. Plasma lances, energy torpedoes, and kinetic slugs rained down on the Resolute. But its new generation of shielding, based on principles reverse-engineered from the ancient structure, absorbed the impacts with ease. Then the Resolute struck back. Its weapon systems were unlike anything the Council had encountered. The new fusion lance cannons cut through enemy hulls like paper. Advanced AI-assisted targeting meant every shot landed with surgical precision. The battle should have been a massacre, but not in the way the Council expected. Minutes later, the last Council warship exploded in a brilliant fireball, leaving only the Resolute floating in the void. Victorious. Humanity's test was complete. Their technology wasn't just on par with the Council. It was superior. The time for secrecy was over. The Resolute sent a single message back to Earth: "We are ready." Humanity had spent years in exile, forced into the shadows. But now they were stepping into the light once more, and this time, they weren't just another galactic power. They were the beginning of something far greater, a force that no Council decree could control, an empire built not from privilege, but from defiance. And when they returned to claim their place among the stars, there would be no mercy. The battle at the edge of Council space was just the beginning. Humanity had taken its first step back into the galactic stage, and it had done so with fire and fury. But this was not just a moment of triumph, it was a moment of decision. Would they strike now, using their advantage to cripple the Galactic Council before it could react? Or would they wait, strengthening their forces, gathering intelligence, and ensuring that when war came, it would not just be a battle, but an extinction-level event for anyone who dared stand against them? The answer was clear. Humanity had waited for years in the shadows. What were a few more? As the Resolute returned to Earth, its databanks overflowing with Council fleet compositions, weapon systems, and defense networks, humanity's leaders gathered for a historic meeting. Military commanders, scientific minds, industrial magnates, all came together with one singular purpose. How do you overthrow an empire that spans the stars? The Council had ruled the galaxy for millennia, not through conquest, but through control. They controlled the hyperlanes. They controlled economic trade, routes. They controlled the technology, ensuring that no species ever developed weapons powerful enough to challenge them. They didn't need to fight wars. They ensured no one could ever rise to the level where war was even possible. And for centuries, it had worked. Until now. Because humanity had done something no other species had ever achieved. They had broken. Free of the system. No more hyperlanes. No more artificial limitations. No more control. The war to come would not be a conventional one. It wouldn't be a matter of fleet-on-fleet engagements, where sheer numbers decided the outcome. It would be something far more insidious. A war of intelligence. A war of sabotage. A war fought in the dark before the first official shots were even fired. For the next 5 years, humanity played the greatest deception the galaxy had ever seen. They used their slipstream drives not just for warships, but for spies, infiltrators, and saboteurs. They mapped every Council facility, every shipyard, every key industrial hub. They inserted sleeper agents into the economies of lesser Council-aligned species, subtly disrupting supply chains, slowing ship production, creating the illusion that everything was still under control, even as the foundations crumbled beneath them. They spread misinformation. Through clandestine channels, they leaked rumors of a rogue human faction operating beyond the borders of charted space. They fed the Council false intelligence, reports that humanity was fractured, that their exile had splintered them into warring colonies, that they were still struggling to survive. And the Council believed it. After all, how could a single species, alone and cut off, possibly threaten an empire that had stood unchallenged for thousands of years? It was the greatest mistake they would ever make. Because as the Council grew complacent, humanity was forging the single most advanced war machine the galaxy had ever seen. The Black Armada, a fleet unlike any before it. Every ship equipped with slipstream drives, allowing them to strike anywhere, at any time, without warning. Weapon systems that merged human ingenuity with the recovered technologies of the ancient structure, capable of piercing even the heaviest Council defenses. Swarm-based drone warfare that turned every battlefield into a slaughterhouse. Cyber warfare systems that could cripple enemy fleets before a single shot was fired. But the most terrifying weapon of all, humanity itself. For centuries, the Council had feared the ferocity of human soldiers. Even before their exile, humanity's warriors had been infamous, not for their numbers, but for their sheer adaptability, their relentless pursuit of victory, their refusal to surrender even in the face of impossible odds. Now, after years of exile, after years of planning, training, and preparation, they had become something even more terrifying. They were no longer soldiers. They were revenants, ghosts of a civilization the Council had tried to bury, now risen from the grave, carrying weapons forged in the fires of exile, marching toward a reckoning that had been long overdue. And the first target? Not the Council homeworld. Not their mighty core systems. Not their fleets. No, humanity's first strike was far more strategic. They would target the hyperlanes themselves. Because while humanity no longer needed the hyperlanes, the rest of the galaxy still did. The Council's power wasn't just in their fleets or their technology, it was in their control of movement. If you controlled the hyperlanes, you controlled the flow of resources, commerce, reinforcements, And if you destroyed them, you threw the entire galaxy into chaos. The plan was audacious. The Council had never considered the possibility of the hyperlanes being tampered with. They were thought to be immutable, a natural feature of the universe itself, stable, unchangeable. But humanity had spent the last 5 years proving that the impossible was just another problem waiting to be solved. Using principles derived from the ancient structures technology, human scientists had discovered a way to destabilize hyperlane junctions. Not just disable them, but collapse them entirely, turning once vital trade routes into dead space, cutting entire star systems off from one another in an instant. The first test was conducted in secret, on an unimportant, lightly trafficked route at the edge of Council space. A single human strike team infiltrated a relay station, deployed a prototype destabilizer, and watched as a hyperlane that had existed for hundreds of thousands of years imploded. Gone. In a matter of seconds, an entire trade corridor vanished from the galaxy's map, and the Council had no idea why. The first collapse was written off as a freak event, an anomaly, some rare cosmic fluctuation. Then the second hyperlane collapsed. Then the third. Within months, entire sectors of Council-controlled space were in disarray. Fleets were stranded, supply lines were severed. Economies began to spiral, out of control. And still, humanity remained in the shadows. The Council scrambled to find a solution, but there was none. No one had ever considered the possibility of hyperlanes being weaponized. No countermeasures existed. No defenses could be put in place. It was at this moment, when the Council was at its most vulnerable, that humanity finally stepped into the light. Across hundreds of Council systems, intercepted transmissions played a single message. You exiled us. You thought you had ended us. You were wrong. Humanity has returned, and we are taking everything. And then, the Black Armada arrived, not to negotiate, not to talk, but to conquer. The galaxy had always feared what humanity could become, but they had never truly imagined what would happen if that fear was fully realized. When the Black Armada emerged from the shadows, it did not arrive with grand declarations or empty threats. There was no warning, no demands for surrender. Humanity's vengeance began in silence, with the cold precision of a species that had spent decades perfecting the art of war from the darkness. The first system to fall was Velora Prime, a heavily fortified Council outpost guarding one of the last remaining hyperlanes in the outer sectors. The system had stood as a symbol of the Council's power for nearly 7,000 years. Its orbital defenses had repelled pirate fleets, border conflicts, and even minor rebellions. But when the Black Armada arrived, the system's defenses were torn apart in under 2 hours. No one even saw the human ships arrive. One moment, the skies above Velora Prime were clear, an endless canvas of distant stars. The next, hundreds of human warships slipped into reality, without a single ripple in the void. The Council's sensors didn't even register the approach until it was too late. It wasn't just an invasion. It was a demonstration. The ships were unlike anything the Council had ever encountered. Sleek, angular designs built entirely around functionality and lethality. Their hulls shimmered with adaptive stealth coatings, making them nearly invisible to both sensors and the naked eye. Their weapon systems didn't just fire conventional plasma or kinetic rounds, they fired hypersonic mass drivers. Solid tungsten slugs accelerated to near-light speeds. One shot from a human railgun could punch clean through a Council dreadnought's armor, vaporizing entire decks in an instant. But the most terrifying aspect of the Black Armada wasn't its firepower. It was its tactics. Humans didn't fight wars like other species. They didn't rely on overwhelming numbers or brute force. They fought with surgical precision, striking at the weakest points in the Council's defenses: communications hubs, supply depots, command centers. Every human fleet operated like a predator stalking its prey, patient, calculating, and utterly merciless. When the battle for Velora Prime began, it was over before the Council even understood what was happening. Their defensive platforms were disabled in minutes. Planetary shield generators collapsed without a single shot being fired, sabotaged by human infiltrators who had been living among the population for years. Entire battalions of Council soldiers found their own weapons turned against them as human cyber warfare programs hijacked security systems and automated defenses. By the time the first Council reinforcements arrived, they found nothing but burning wreckage. Not a single human ship had been lost. And at the heart of the devastation, broadcast across every surviving communication relay in the system, was a simple message. You should have let us in. Now we're taking everything. The galaxy had never seen warfare like this before. For centuries, the Council had fought wars according to ancient traditions. Honorable declarations, formal battles, and carefully negotiated ceasefires. Humanity played by no such rules. To them, war was not a contest of pride or politics. It was survival, and survival meant absolute annihilation. In the months that followed, the Black Armada unleashed a campaign of calculated terror across the outer systems. Strategic targets were obliterated without warning. Entire fleets vanished without a trace. Hyperlane relay stations, once the lifeblood of the galaxy, were systematically collapsed by human destabilizers, severing entire regions from the wider Council network. What the Council had once seen as a minor exile had now become the most coordinated insurgency in galactic history. But even as the Black Armada carved through system after system, the galaxy still didn't understand what it was truly facing, because the war they could see was only half the battle. Beneath the surface, the Revenants were already at work. They were humanity's hidden weapon, a force of genetically augmented, cybernetically enhanced operatives trained not just in combat, but in infiltration, sabotage, and psychological warfare. Every Council world occupied by humanity became a breeding ground for rebellion. Entire populations were turned against their own governments through carefully crafted propaganda campaigns. Council officials were assassinated in their own homes without a trace. Military leaders defected or vanished overnight. Civil unrest spread like wildfire. Paranoia blooming as whispers of human spies hiding among them began to take hold. Entire species began to fear their own neighbors. The Council's power had always relied on order, on the illusion that their authority was absolute. But humans understood something far deeper. Fear is the greatest weapon of all. By the end of the first year of war, over 100 systems had fallen into chaos without the Black Armada firing a single shot. But humanity wasn't fighting just to destabilize the Council. They were fighting to replace it. While the Council's forces scrambled to contain the growing rebellion, humanity was already laying the foundations of something far greater: the Soul Dominion. A new empire, built not on bloodlines or tradition, but on merit, innovation, and vengeance. In secret, human diplomats reached out to the countless lesser species that had long suffered under the Council's rule. The outcasts, the forgotten colonies, the broken remnants of failed rebellions. They offered them something no one else ever had: freedom, not through diplomacy, not through negotiations, but through strength. Join humanity, or be left behind. Many species accepted, others resisted, and were swept aside. And so, world by world, system by system, the Soul Dominion grew. The Black Armada expanded. The Revenants spread like a virus. By the time the Council finally realized what was happening, it was already too late. The galaxy they had ruled for thousands of years was no longer theirs. It belonged to humanity's greatest empire. The fall of Velora Prime was just the beginning. The Galactic Council, once a seemingly untouchable force, was now facing something it had never encountered before: an enemy that refused to play by their rules. For millennia, wars had been fought with careful diplomacy, rigid protocols, and an unspoken agreement that conflict must always be contained. Even the most violent disputes had been settled through treaties and negotiations, ensuring that war never truly spiraled out of control. But humanity had no interest in diplomacy, no desire for negotiations. The Black Armada moved like an unrelenting storm, striking with unpredictable brutality. One day, an entire fleet would be wiped from existence in a single engagement. The next, critical infrastructure would collapse from sabotage before a battle even began. The Council's forces, once seen as the pinnacle of military might, found themselves outmaneuvered at every turn. Their fleets were outdated. Their war doctrines were relics of an era where their rule had never been challenged. And their leadership? Paralyzed by bureaucracy, indecision, and an over-reliance on outdated traditions. The war wasn't just a series of battles, it was a psychological onslaught. Humanity knew exactly how to strike fear into the hearts of its enemies. They hacked into the Council's encrypted communications, broadcasting the screams of fallen commanders back to their own officers. They intercepted distress signals, only to send back cold, mocking responses. You abandoned us. Now it's your turn. They weaponized chaos itself. Entire fleets were lured into traps using false distress beacons, guided straight into asteroid fields where human warships lay waiting in the darkness. Elite Council battalions found their supply lines severed, leaving them stranded on desolate worlds as humanity's ground forces closed in. And then there were the Revenants. The Council knew little about them at first. There were only rumors, whispers, of something darker than the Black Armada. But as world after world fell, the truth became undeniable. The Revenants were more than soldiers. They were the ghosts of humanity's exile, warriors who had been reforged in the abyss, augmented beyond recognition, and trained in the most ruthless forms of warfare ever devised. They did not fight on the front lines. They struck from the shadows, turning the Council's own people against them, dismantling planetary defenses from within before a single shot was fired. Council officers were found executed in their bunkers, their own security forces never even realizing an assassin had been among them. Entire planetary governments collapsed overnight when key leaders defected, driven by propaganda campaigns so masterfully orchestrated that they never even realized they were being manipulated. The Revenants didn't just kill, they erased. By the time a world realized it had been infiltrated, the damage was already done. Military defenses were crippled, supply routes were compromised, and the population had already begun to turn against their rulers. And this was where humanity's true genius revealed itself. They didn't just seek destruction, they sought replacement. Where the Council saw war as a means to maintain power, humanity saw it as an opportunity to build something greater. Because as the Black Armada shattered the old order, the Sol Dominion rose from the ashes. The birth of an empire in the void beyond the shattered front lines, humanity's vision was already unfolding. The Sol Dominion was not a kingdom. It was not a republic. It was something entirely new. A meritocracy built not on tradition or aristocracy, but on ability, innovation, and absolute loyalty. Unlike the stagnant bureaucracies of the Council, the Dominion did not allow weakness to fester. Its leaders were not politicians. They were warriors, engineers, scientists, and strategists who had proven themselves through action, not status. And it was growing. As the Council's forces collapsed, humanity didn't just conquer planets. They transformed them. Every world they seized was reforged into something stronger. Cities were rebuilt as fortress hubs, infrastructure optimized for war production, and entire populations re-educated to embrace the Dominion's cause. And they weren't alone. For centuries, dozens of species had suffered under the Council's oppressive rule. Lesser civilizations relegated to the outskirts of galactic society, their potential smothered under layers of restrictions and regulations. But humanity offered them something the Council never did: a place at the table. For the first time in history, the forgotten, the oppressed, and the outcasts had a choice. Serve the Dominion, or be swept aside. And many chose to serve. Entire species defected, pledging themselves to humanity's cause. Not as vassals, but as equals in a new order where power was earned, not inherited. Scientists from alien worlds flocked to human research stations, drawn by the promise of unrestricted innovation. Warriors from dozens of species swore allegiance to the Dominion's banner, abandoning their old rulers to fight for something greater, and, as the Dominion expanded, its war machine grew unstoppable. The Council's last stand, the Galactic Council, was running out of time. Once, they had ruled over thousands of systems. Now, they had been forced back to their last bastions, their fleets reduced to fragmented remnants struggling to hold the line. Desperation had set in. They abandoned their own laws, breaking treaties they had upheld for thousands of years. They unleashed forbidden weapons, turning entire planets into lifeless husks in a desperate bid to slow the Dominion's advance. They sought alliances with species they once deemed beneath them, begging for aid from those they had once oppressed. But it was too late. The Dominion had already won, because the war had never just been about ships and soldiers. It had been about ideology, and the truth was undeniable. The Council had failed. Their corruption, their stagnation, their arrogance had made them obsolete, and now humanity was here to replace them. As the final battles loomed, one question remained. Would the Council surrender, or would humanity burn their legacy to the ground? The war had reached its climax. The Galactic Council, once an unshakable pillar of order, had been reduced to a cornered beast, desperate, wounded, and lashing out in futile defiance. Once, they had commanded thousands of fleets, governed trillions of lives, and dictated the fate of entire species with a mere gesture. Now, their empire was crumbling, their fleets shattered, and their own people turning against them. The Sol, Dominion had done the impossible, but humanity knew that cornered enemies were the most dangerous, and the Council had one final card to play. It was called Project Excision. The Council's last weapon for centuries, the Galactic Council had hidden its greatest atrocity. A forbidden weapon locked deep beneath the surface of Ivanos, the capital, world of the Council's ruling elite. A weapon designed not for conquest, but for erasure. Project Excision was the ultimate failsafe. It was never meant to be deployed, only to exist as a final deterrent. A desperate last measure in case the Council's absolute rule was ever threatened. The weapon was not a bomb, nor a fleet, nor a superweapon that could be fired from orbit. It was far worse. Deep within Ivanos' subterranean vaults, the Council had preserved an ancient remnant of a forgotten war. Something they had uncovered long ago but never dared to unleash. A void singularity. A tear in reality itself. A wound in space-time. An unstable rift that could consume anything. A force so destructive that even the Council had feared it. If released, it would not merely destroy Ivanos. It would erase the system entirely, turn it into a black void, a swirling abyss from which no light, no matter, and no life could ever return. The Council had sealed it away, believing it would never be needed. But now, they were losing. And in their desperation, the surviving counselors, the last remnants of the ruling elite, gathered in the deep underground chambers beneath their burning capital. The decision was made. If the Dominion was going to take Ivanos, then Ivanos would cease to exist. The siege of Ivanos, humanity's final campaign, began with a single transmission. Intercepted Council distress signals, panicked messages sent across what remained of their fleet networks. Humanity's intelligence, officers decrypted them within minutes. The message was chilling. Project Excision has been authorized. Ivanos will burn. The Dominion's high command knew exactly what it meant. They had uncovered fragments of the Council's hidden history. Hints of something sealed beneath the capital world. Something too dangerous to be used even in the darkest days of war. Now, that horror was about to be unleashed. The countdown had begun. If the singularity was activated, the war would be won. But the prize would be lost. Ivanos held more than the remnants of the Council's power. It was a vault of knowledge. Centuries of technological advancements, hidden archives of species thought extinct, records of every secret the Council had ever buried. It was the key to the future. If it was lost, humanity would never truly know what had been kept from them. There was no time for a prolonged battle. No time for a conventional siege. The Dominion had to act immediately, and so, for the first time, every force humanity had assembled moved as one. The Black Armada, every warship, every strike fleet, every vessel capable of battle, converged on the system. Emerging from slipstream space like an apocalyptic storm, the Revenant Corps. The elite of the elite, deployed deep into enemy territory before the battle, even began infiltrating the planet itself under the cover of the Dominion's final assault. The Vanguard Legion, the Dominion's most advanced ground forces, hardened by years of war, prepared to storm the last stronghold of the Council with overwhelming force. This was not just the end of a war. It was the death of an era. The final battle. The moment the Black Armada entered the system, Ivanos's defenders opened fire. What remained of the Council's fleet had formed a desperate blockade around the planet, their warships arranged in tight defensive formations, ready to fight to the last. But humanity was done playing by the old rules. From the moment the battle began, the Dominion's forces moved with brutal precision. The Black Armada struck first. While the Council's warships focused their fire on the Dominion's main fleet, ghost ships, cloaked, unmanned vessels loaded with nuclear payloads, slipped past their defensive lines, detonating inside their formations before they even realized what had happened. Entire battlecruisers vanished in the first few minutes. Then came the Revenants. Already inside Ivanos's defenses before the battle began, they disabled planetary shields from within, sabotaged anti-air batteries, and unleashed chaos among the defenders. By the time the Vanguard Legion descended, the planet was already in flames. The Council's forces fought with desperation, knowing there was no escape. But against the Dominion's war machine, their defenses crumbled. The streets of the capital became a war zone, human warbots marching through ancient corridors as plasma fire turned marble halls to rubble. And below the surface, in the Council's deepest chambers, the last battle of the war was taking place. The Revenants had reached the activation chamber. There, in the cold glow of ancient machinery, the surviving counselors had already begun the final sequence. The singularity was seconds from being unleashed, an event that would consume everything. But the Revenants were faster. A single, silent strike team of augmented soldiers, armed with weapons, centuries ahead of the Council's understanding, breached the chamber, and in that moment, the war truly ended. The Council's last rulers, once the architects of galactic oppression, were given one final choice: surrender, or be erased. Some tried to resist. They died within seconds. The last of the Council, those who saw the inevitability of their defeat, dropped their weapons and fell to their knees. And the activation sequence stopped. The singularity remained contained, forever sealed. Humanity had not only won the war, they had won the future. A new age begins. The war was over. The Council was no more, and from the ruins of their empire, the sole Dominion arose as the new power of the galaxy. But they did not claim dominion through tyranny. They rebuilt. Worlds that had suffered under the Council's rule were restored. Broken civilizations were given a second chance. Knowledge that had been hoarded for millennia was shared. Humanity had not returned as conquerors. They had returned as something greater, as the architects of a new galactic order. The age of stagnation was over. The age of humanity had begun. The war was over. For the first time in millennia, the galaxy stood at the edge of a new era. The Galactic Council, the ancient power that had dictated the fate of entire civilizations, was no more. Their fleets had been reduced to drifting wreckage. Their homeworlds left smoldering. Their rulers either executed or sentenced to face trials under the very laws they once twisted to control others. But victory was only the beginning. Wars do not truly end with the final battle. The true test of power is not found in destruction, but in what comes after. Humanity had torn down the old order, but now they had to build something new. And so, from the ashes of the Council's fallen Dominion, humanity set out to forge something greater, something no empire had ever achieved before. A galactic civilization, united not by fear, but by purpose. The trials of the fallen. The first step toward rebuilding the galaxy was justice. For too long, the Council's rulers had hidden behind their wealth and power, believing themselves untouchable. They had ordered the extermination of entire species, enslaved worlds, and hoarded technology that could have advanced civilizations by centuries. Now, they would answer for their crimes. Humanity did not simply execute them in secrecy. They held trials, broadcast across every remaining star system, ensuring that the people of the galaxy saw justice done. The High Tribunal, established on the now liberated world of Ulyssar Prime, became the stage for the most significant trials in galactic history. The last of the Council's leadership were brought in chains before the Dominion's representatives, humans and non-humans alike. The evidence was overwhelming. Records from the vaults of Ivanos revealed centuries of atrocities that had been hidden from the public. Some Council leaders still clung to arrogance, believing their influence would save them. They sneered at the humans, calling them upstarts, lesser beings who had simply gotten lucky. But there was no mercy left for them. The verdict was unanimous. Every high-ranking official who had played a role in the Council's oppression was sentenced. Some were executed, their names erased from history. Others were sent to prison worlds, stripped of their power, forced to witness the rise of a new order they would never be part of. And with that, the era of the Council was finally put to rest. The Grand Reformation, with the Council gone, the galaxy faced a new challenge: rebuilding. Entire star systems had been devastated by war. Formerly enslaved species had no leadership, no economies, and no direction. The very infrastructure that had once allowed galactic civilization to function had been shattered. If left unchecked, the collapse of the Council could have plunged the galaxy into a new dark age. But humanity refused to let that happen. The Dominion did not install a new dictatorship. They did not place human rulers over alien worlds. Instead, they did something no empire had ever attempted. They built a system where every species had a voice. At the heart of the Sol Dominion, on the reforged world of Ivanos, humanity established the Galactic Concord, a council of equals, not masters. Unlike the old council, which had existed only to serve the elite, the Concord was designed to ensure that no single species could dominate the rest. Every liberated world was given representation. For the first time in history, humans and non-humans stood side by side, not as conquerors and subjects, but as partners in shaping the future. And unlike the old council, which had kept technological advancement stagnant for fear of change, humanity unleashed the full potential of innovation. The knowledge hoarded in the council's archives was declassified and shared. Worlds that had suffered under technological suppression saw their industries leap forward centuries overnight. The Dominion's most brilliant minds, both human and alien, worked to reverse engineer and improve the lost sciences once hidden from the galaxy. Medical advancements cured plagues that had once been deliberately left unchecked. New energy sources, once forbidden by the Council, revolutionized interstellar travel, making colonization faster and more efficient. For the first time, the barriers that had kept civilizations divided were torn down, and the galaxy thrived. The unification of power. Of course, there were those who resisted. Not everyone welcomed the rise of humanity's new empire. Scattered remnants of the old regime, warlords who had once profited from the Council's rule, and species who had once stood as humanity's enemies, many of them saw the Dominion as just another conqueror in disguise. And so, even after the war ended, conflicts erupted. Pirate fleets harassed trade routes. Former Council military leaders, now reduced to insurgents, waged guerrilla wars on distant worlds, and a new shadow began to stir beyond the fringes of known space, something even the Council had feared to confront. But the Dominion did not falter. Unlike the old regime, which had ruled through fear and stagnation, humanity adapted. The Dominion's military evolved, integrating the best of every species' technologies into a single, unstoppable force. Former enemies became allies, their warriors now fighting under the same banners they once despised. And when the last of the resistance was crushed, the Dominion emerged stronger than ever. For the first time in galactic history, war did not lead to endless cycles of destruction. It led to true unity, the dawn of a new empire, and so, the Sol Dominion became more than just a ruling power. It became the foundation of something greater. An empire not built on conquest, but on progress. Not fueled by fear, but by the promise of a better future. Under humanity's guidance, the once fractured civilizations of the galaxy became a single, united force. Exploration expanded beyond what the Council had ever allowed. New star systems were colonized, ancient mysteries uncovered, and the limits of science pushed beyond anything previously imagined. For centuries, the Galactic Council had stifled growth, fearing what lay beyond the known. But humanity thrived in the unknown. The Dominions. Explorers went beyond the edges of mapped space, pushing into uncharted galaxies, discovering wonders beyond anything previously conceived, new frontiers, new challenges, and perhaps new threats. Because if humanity had learned anything, it was that the galaxy was vast and they were not alone. The final question. The Council had once thought banning humanity would be their greatest victory. Instead, it was their greatest mistake. By casting humanity aside, they had forced them to evolve, to grow, to become something more. Now, as the rulers of the most powerful civilization in history, humanity had one question left to answer. They had conquered the stars. They had united the galaxy. But beyond the darkness of the void, beyond the last remnants of the old world, what lay waiting for them in the great unknown? And when they finally found it, would it fear them? Or would they be the ones who needed to fear what came next? The age of humanity had begun, and the galaxy would never be the same.